everybody, and welcome to the Ultimate Job Search and Career Podcast. I am the company's expert, and today we're going to talk about hiring, and in particular, we're going to talk about how to pass the MBTI, the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. This entire episode is based purely on a question that one of my awesome viewers/listeners sent in. This was sent in by Salem Smith, and Salem Smith says, what is a company looking for if they use the MBTI, the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, to determine who they want to hire? Since they use these tests now to rule out hiring potential employees, how should we answer the test? Is there an ideal personality type to shoot for? I would really like to see this as a future video. Okay, excellent. Well, listen, special thanks to Salem Smith for sending this in. Now, hopefully everybody has heard of the MBTI, the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. It is a personality test. It has been around for many, many years. Its origins are over 100 years old. And full disclosure, I'm a big believer in this. I have seen it work some wonders in an organization. Okay, but it's funny because if you go to Wikipedia and read about it, there's a hell of a lot of criticism directed against it. Now, just before we start, I want to say this. I feel that a lot of the criticism is unfair because the original MBTI, the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, it's very, very simple, and it tells you some basic things, okay? And that, I feel, is very effective. However, in recent years, starting in the 1980s, they've been adding a bunch of stuff to this personality test and making it super complicated and making it supposedly be able to predict all kinds of employment-related things, which it was never designed to do. So it doesn't really surprise me that people now criticize it and say it's no good at predicting whether you're going to succeed in a certain job or not. Well, that was never what it was supposed to be for. So yeah, it's not going to tell you that. What it's going to do, it's going to tell you some basic things about your personality. Now, regardless of what I think of it and what everyone else thinks of it, the MBTI was also made famous because for many years in the world of recruitment and selection, this was the only personality test that they were using. Okay, so that's also kind of what brought it to prominence recently, is because just like Salem Smith is asking about, this has been used by recruiters as some kind of filter to filter candidates to see if they're suitable for a certain job. Now, the problem is, and this is a common theme actually in the world of recruitment and selection, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing because there's a lot of people that think they understand this and they don't. Let's very, very briefly just look at what the MBTI actually is. It's 4 letters, okay, and it classifies, each of the 4 letters is binary, so it classifies you as one thing or another thing. So the first letter is could be either an I or an E for introvert or extrovert, okay? And if you take this personality test, it's going to tell you if you're an introvert or an extrovert. Now, an introvert is somebody who can do social interaction, but they find it an energy-draining experience, whereas an extrovert is someone who can also do social interaction, but they find it an energy-charging experience, okay? Now, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, you could still be either terrible or amazing at things like public speaking and things like networking, okay? Just because you're an introvert, it doesn't mean that you can't do it and you can't do that stuff well. And just because you're an extrovert, it doesn't mean that you're automatically going to do that stuff well either. These are independent of your actual skills. All it's telling you is whether you enjoy it or not, whether you would choose to do it or not, okay? So for example, an introvert is somebody who, when they come home after a hard day at work, they tend to want to be alone. They tend to want to be quiet. Either they watch TV or they read a book. And that's what they do to recharge. Whereas an extrovert is somebody who, after they've come home from a hard day's work, they'd like to surround themselves with 50 people and have a big social gathering or social event and they enjoy talking to people that they don't know. Okay. So that's an extrovert. They find that enjoyable, and that's what they do to relax. Okay. So you can possibly see where this might be useful in the world of recruitment and selection. Okay. Because, for example, let's say that they were hiring for the job of research assistant. Okay. And that job requires the person to spend pretty much their entire day alone by themselves, not interacting with any other coworkers, and not being social, not, watching TV, but working in a quiet environment by themselves. Now, as you can imagine, okay, both an introvert and an extrovert would likely be able to do that kind of work. However, an introvert would tend to enjoy the fact that you're working by yourself all day, whereas an extrovert would tend to not like the fact that you're working by yourself all day. Okay? So we're not speaking to ability. We're speaking to preferences on this first one. Okay? So it's this kind of thing that the Myers-Briggs type indicator tells you. Okay? Now, here's the deal. I mean, it depends on what you use this information for. If you're going to use this information to say this candidate is better than that candidate, that's where you run into a bit of trouble, because just because somebody has a tendency to like this type of activity a little bit more in general than maybe the average person, does that mean that they're a great employee? No, it doesn't, right? Humans are very complex and wonderful beings. There's a lot of variation and there's a lot of factors, and reducing a candidate down to just using this test is absolutely ridiculous in my opinion and in my experience. When I was CEO, I made everyone in my entire company take this test, and I looked at all the results, and it was quite revealing. The number one thing I noticed is that all the people that were the same type, the same one of the 16 personalities that this thing classifies you into, they would be the ones that would all sit together in the lunchroom. They're the ones that tend to get along as people the best. These are the kinds of things that this tool revealed. It's like, it's no coincidence that those 5 people always like to hang around together, because they happen to be all the same personality type we just found out, right? So anyway, so this is the MBTI. I'm not going to get any further into what it is. Let's talk about how you can pass an interview when they're using this as part of their evaluation. Okay. Now here's the deal. This has been used to try and classify employees, and it's been based on the recruiter having preconceived notions about the personality type of the candidate that they're going for. Okay. So for example, in my example I just used, it was a research assistant. You're going to be working alone all day, every day for like 8 hours at a time. And in this case, a recruiter who is familiar with the MBTI might have already made the decision that, okay, what we're looking for here in a candidate is we're looking for an introvert. Okay. Now, is that the correct thing to look for? In this case, which is kind of an extreme example, I would say probably yes, but it's certainly not hard evidence that they would be the perfect candidate. So what we're talking about really is the fact that the recruiter has already made up their mind that they're looking for a certain type of person. Okay. Now, the reality of the MBTI is that it classifies people into 16 different personalities. You end up, the result of it is it'll tell you which one of the 16 personalities best fits you. Okay. That's the end result of this thing. And then you can go and take that personality that it supposedly says you are, and you can read up on it, and you can decide for yourself if that really describes you as a person or it doesn't. Okay. In most cases, at least in my experience, people read the result and they say, yeah, that seems to describe me, but it's not it's not guaranteed because, as you can appreciate, on a continuum between extreme introvert and extreme extrovert, you could lie anywhere on that spectrum, okay? You could either be a really hardcore introvert, or you could be a hardcore extrovert, or you could be a sort of mild introvert or a mild extrovert, or you could be halfway between the two. You see, that's the thing. It doesn't really take that into account, at least not traditionally. So that's why there's some variation in, whether this thing accurately describes you. It might tell you you're an introvert, when in reality, you might be kind of like, you're 51% introvert, right? Okay. So, but in any case, if the recruiter is using the MBTI, it's because they have some preconceived notions of what personality types they're looking for. Okay. Now, what some people will tell you is that if you're going for the research assistant job and they're going to make you take the MBTI, or they're going to ask you, to have taken it on your own and to tell them what the result was. Okay. There are some people that will tell you, try and figure out what personality type they're going for, and then say you're that. Okay. And, if they give you the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator test, where they ask you like a whole bunch of questions and then it classifies you into one of the 16 personalities, try and say, answer the questions from the point of view of like, you like working alone, and, you don't want a job where people talk to you all day long and you spend your whole day talking. Okay. And then that will stack the test in the favor of saying that you're an introvert, and then that will fit in with the personality type that they're looking for, and then you'll get the job, or you'll be more likely to get the job. There are some people that will tell you to do that, and you could do that. It's up to you. I mean, it's almost like exaggerating a story in a job interview. Is it against the law? No. Do people do it? Yes. Does it work out in the end? Sometimes, but sometimes it can also be making you a bad fit for the job. Because if you're not an introvert and you're a raging extrovert, and the thought of being alone all day long in a room by yourself doing research is abhorrent to you, but yet you're applying for this job for the money, and you successfully rig this test somehow to have it come back as an introvert. They ask you questions like, do you like being alone? And you say, yes. They ask you questions like, what do you like to do when you come home? And you say like, oh, I like to be by myself and read a book. When none of that's true, you might end up in a job where you have to work all day by yourself in a small room, talking to nobody, feeling lonely, feeling absolutely terrible, and you might probably go nuts after a couple of months of that. Is that a good outcome? I'll leave that for you to decide. Okay. The reality is that this tool is made for people to figure out who they are. If you know who you are, you can then perhaps decide on what's the best career for you, or what's the best type of work environment for you. Things like this, what you do with the information is entirely up to you. What this thing does is it tells you 4 things. One of them is, are you an introvert or an extrovert? Okay. That's all it does. So, it is possible to fudge this thing, but personally, my opinion that is self-defeating, and you're doing yourself a disservice. And if the recruiter that you're interviewing with, that's evaluating you, if they have got it into their head that they're looking for a certain type of personality, and the personality type trumps your experience and your qualifications, I would say, that's a bad way of evaluating people. And if you do get hired on the basis of having the right personality for it in somebody's estimation, that's kind of risky. Okay. So if it were me and I had to do the MBTI as part of a series of job interviews, I would do it honestly. And if they honestly want someone like you, great. You know it's a fit and you know that it's going to work out. If they have some weird ideas, like they want someone not like you, when in fact you are qualified and you've done that kind of work before and you know you can do it, that's not a good place to work. It's not going to end well, you know? So I just be honest. There's no way you can fudge it, because in reality, there are no right answers to this thing. It just describes you. And if somebody else is going to read into it a bunch of silly kind of things that take precedence over experience and education, then they're not going to get good candidates anyway. And maybe that's also a source of some of the criticism that this tool has gotten recently. So that's what I'll say about that. I've done a series of videos about this quite a while ago, like a couple of years ago. If you go to my YouTube channel, The Company's Expert, and you look up MBTI, you'll see there are several videos where I go in depth about this. But there's a lot of people that really believe in this, and there's a lot of people that really, really don't. It tends to really divide the audience when I talk about the MBTI. So that's why I haven't done it in a while. It's not about logic. It's about just what people believe, apparently. So anyway, hopefully that was helpful. Thanks very much to Salem Smith for sending this in. You guys are awesome for sending in your questions. There's some really intelligent questions that have come in, and I'm going to do my best to try and answer those. So thank you very much, and hope to see you on the next episode. Take care.